this idea that you are here forever, again, we all know cognitively life's going to come to an end at some point, but we don't actually consciously live our life in awareness of that.
Hello, and welcome to In the Rising podcast. My name is Bettina Brown, and this is the platform I've chosen to talk about living a life that's in alignment with your hopes, your dreams, and your goals. Really walking towards intention and focus in life, and really having that power in that moment. My guest today is Jamal Jivanjee, who had a transformation to the depths that you can only have a transformation from. He shares his own dark night of the soul and what caused him to be at peace and find his joy, and how he helps others also find their peace and joy and that excitement and energy that they want to invest in their life. So thank you, Jamal, for spending some time with me today on In the Rising podcast. I'm really eager to talk to you because a lot of your story and a lot of the things you talk about are passionate for me. I can talk about them for hours. So thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's an honor, and I really appreciate you. I always say it takes such intentionality to create shows like yours, where you're having focused, intentional conversations, and I don't take that lightly. I know how much work that is, so I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, you're right. It does take work, but when you love what you do, that work changes, right? And we're going to go into that. So I have some information about you, but I want to start with this, because in some information I had, it says, imagine if you were told by your doctor you have 6 months to live, how would your day-to-day change? And the background of that resonated with me because that's the whole reason why I started this podcast. As a physical therapist working with clients with breast cancer, some survived and had much ahead of them, and others passed during our treatment. And a lot of our conversations revolved around that, what I should have done, when I should have started living, what I could have done. Share with us where your thoughts were with this. Like, why did this become a powerful statement for you to change or live your life by?
It's a great question. I have one of the things that really got me out of a very dark place in my life. Several years ago, I went through just a challenging depression. Just through my own confronting the own traumas in my own life. I got to the point where I really didn't want to live anymore. I would say I was suicidal, but I didn't even have the energy to even do that. Mm-hmm. It was just a complete lack of energy. If I could have hit a button to end my life, I would have done it. And I remember this thought came to me. The way I look at it is, I call it the grace of God, but it just came from beyond me. But this thought just entered into my consciousness. And the thought was, since you want to die so badly, why don't you do some research on people who've actually died, who've clinically passed away, had an experience, what they call a near-death experience, post-death experience, however you want to put that, and just listen to their stories. So that was a new idea. So I actually ended up finding this book, and it was written by a medical doctor. It's called Life After Life, and he basically documents about 100 individuals he could prove clinically had died and had verifiable experiences that they should have no knowledge of, like information about their own death, post-death information, conversations that they had overheard after they had died, things like that. And their experience, they all had very interesting experiences. So I could talk a lot about that, but in a nutshell, one of the things that was communicated to these people in their experiences was, your life is a gift. Mm-hmm. It's this idea that you are here forever. Again, we all know cognitively life's going to come to an end at some point, but we don't actually consciously live our life in awareness of that. So obviously these folks who had this experience, death became part of their consciousness. And what was communicated to them was, it's not your time. You're here on purpose. There's something for you. You're here to do and to learn. There's work you're here to do. There's things you're here to learn. And a lot of these folks would then be resuscitated and come back into their body with this new awareness. And a lot of these folks, they were, even though they were told you're here on purpose, they didn't know their purpose. But what they did realize was, doesn't matter. Your purpose is to live, to have this experience, because you're not here forever. And their lives were transformed after these experiences, because they approached every day. They knew, if I wake up today and I'm here on purpose. Mm-hmm. It's not an accident. I'm here. And so they approached every day, like the mundane things, right? The things that we take for granted: drinking water, drinking coffee, eating meals, conversations with loved ones. They profoundly saw that as a temporary gift. And we do that with everything, right? We go to Disney World. I had a family member came out to visit us in California recently, and they wanted to go to Disneyland. So they went to Disneyland, and I said, "What did you guys do?" And they were like, "Oh, it was amazing. We had a great time." But if we were to break down really what they did, they stood in line most of the day. It was hot. They got something to eat, something to drink, and they had brief few moments of fun rides. But for whatever reason, it was an extremely enjoyable event for them. And so I asked them, I was like, "Well, was it the waiting in line? Was it a different kind of waiting in line than you do in normal everyday life?" Like, no, it's the same kind, right? Eating and drinking, is the food that much different at Disneyland than it is anywhere else? No. So what made it so enjoyable? And it was like light bulbs were going off. We were talking about this because you chose it. You mm-hmm. chose to be here. You wanted to be here. And therefore, this entire experience, the quote unquote mundane experiences of Disneyland, and the enjoyable parts of the rides and the not so enjoyable part of being hot, all of it didn't matter. It all was a gift. And we chalked it up to, this was a fantastic day. I was like, every day can actually, I know this sounds cliche, but my work as a coach, I always say, if you had a choice about how you were to live your life, would you choose to be here, or would you be forced into it? Would you feel like this is just something you have to get through? And typically when people get the news of terminal illness, life's, going to be over soon, we realize really quickly that this isn't forever. And because of that, then it gives us an ability to choose, to tap agency into how we want to show up for our day in and day out life. And so that's really kind of the heart behind that message.
Yeah. And I like the way you put that, is the choice, because a lot of times, and from speaking from personal experience and from the client's stories is where I'm drawing this from, is that the feeling of choice has been eliminated, that we have given up our power, and that, well, I have to do that, and I have to. And, it's not just little kids that don't want to be told what to do. It's all of us. And to really add that choice factor into that is so pivotal.
100%.
Yes. So you say right here, we cannot wait for retirement, for heaven, for the weekend, or for vacation. Live today. Say someone's across from you and they're like, okay, live today. But what do I do first? What does that even look like?
Yeah, great. Another great question. I can maybe tell you a little story. I had a conversation with someone not too long ago, and they were, I wrote a book in 2019 called Living for a Living. And this guy was telling me, he said, I wish I could live for a living. He said, unfortunately, I have to go to work. I got to do this job. And I said, oh, okay. I said, do you like your job? He goes, no, I hate it. I hate my job. I said, okay, well, why do you work there? He said, because I have to. I was like, what do you mean you have to? He's like, well, I have to pay the bills. I'm not fortunate enough to just have the luxury of quitting my job and doing what makes me happy. This is what pays the bills. And I want to put food on the table and take care of my family. I said, okay. I said, so you feel like you have to do it? He says, that's right. I said, so therefore you're suffering, right? Because you have to do it. I said, can I challenge your thinking for a moment? He goes, sure. I said, you don't actually have to go to work today. He's like, what do you mean I don't have to go to work? I said, you don't actually have to. He's like, I have to. I was like, no. I was like, you feel like you don't have a choice, but a lot of people, what happens is there's economic cutbacks. People get pink slips sometimes. People get laid off. They lose their job. That could happen to you. That could happen to you. And he said, yeah, it could happen. It actually happens. They were going through a season where people were losing their job at his employment. I said, if that happened to you, what would you do? He said, I'd do something. I'd figure something out. I said, yeah, you would, wouldn't you? I said, so you could quit your job. I was like, why don't you quit? You could quit your job today. You don't have to go to work today. Nobody is holding a gun to your head telling you have to go to work. Well, if I don't go to work, I'll lose my job. I said, okay, you'd lose your job. And then what would you do? Let's say you got a pink. What would you do something, right? You could quit, call in and quit. And he came to the conclusion where it was, okay, I don't really want to do that. I said, why don't you want to do that? He said, well, because I do enjoy the paycheck. I said, oh, you enjoy the paycheck. It does pay the bills today. And he said, yes, it does. I said, okay. So what I'm hearing you say is that the consequences of not going to work are less desirable than going to work. So you're actually choosing to go to work and to be there today. Is that what you're saying? He's like, well, I haven't thought about it. I said, well, see, here's the opportunity. If you want to start living for a living, it's about moving away from what you quote unquote have to do and moving into your choice, moving into a level of desire. I said, see, in your narrative, in your head, you think you don't have a choice, but you do. We already established it. If you were to lose your job today, you would do something different. Mm-hmm. You could quit your job today. Now you say, oh, I don't like the benefits of that, or I don't like the consequences of that. So therefore I'm going to choose to go to work. It's great. Choose it. Just choose it and watch how your day, the tension, the resistance internally is a little bit lighter today. What we call stress. First of all, stress doesn't exist outside of us. We can't find it anywhere. It's not like it's there down the street somewhere. Stress is an internal experience. And that internal experience is a result of resistance. When you resist, when there's, even if you go to the gym, there's like stress training or resistance training, right? When you resist the way life is in this moment, you feel stressed. And so I was telling them, the one way to reduce resistance internally so that ease can come back into your experience is choose it. If you're going to go to work today, choose to be there. If you can only find one positive reason to be there, maybe it's a paycheck. Hey, at least they're paying you, right? So you're not a slave. Mm-hmm. You're actually getting paid. Amazing. And what will you do with that money? You can think about that. Oh, I will feed healthy food to my family. I'll pay for this amazing dwelling I have. Immediately, you're now choosing and you're feeling gratitude for what you're receiving. This is a game changer. It's the first step to moving into choosing your life and living with choice, because we don't actually have to do anything. You don't even have to get out of bed today.
Mm-hmm. And I like the way you phrase that, because it is about perspective. And I think there is a great quote, I think it's Viktor Frankl, you're probably very familiar with it, that he was a person in the concentration camp, and he said, what you can't take from me is in me, in my mind, that this is the circumstance, but how I view my life and what my purpose is, you can't take that from me. And in that, there is the gaining of power and choice, but it did take a choice to do that. And when we feel like we don't have choices, we don't have options, and there's no point to anything. We feel like the Minions from TV, and that's a cute show, but it's another thing when you feel like that minion. And I definitely heard that from my clients, and I certainly have changed my perspective on my personal life. And there is a rise above that. That's what I love about this podcast title that took me forever to come up with. But to rise above that circumstance, that you don't have to be just this product of something that's around you. So people make a choice. And you also talked about viewing life from energy healing, changing all other modalities and perspectives. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yes. Okay. So to go back maybe to my example here, a lot of times when we feel trapped in something, or we feel a high degree of stress, most of our suffering is actually not coming from what's happening in this moment. It's coming from a perspective of the way the future will be, right? how we imagine the future. This is the way it's always going to be. Even that statement, oh, this is a never ending struggle, right? So we're actually imagining a future in which the struggle just keeps going on and on and on. This is what's causing so much suffering. And I always say, in this moment, though, if you just approach this moment, there's no future. It doesn't exist. It's only in the mind. The mind imagines the future. But where is the mind coming up with the future? It's coming up with the future from the past. It's drawing from the past experience and then projecting that into the future. Well, this affects our energy system. So we have, there's energy in the body. There's some, depending on what school of thought you come from. My understanding is that there's really three major dimensions to this physical self. There's a physical body, literally the flesh and blood. That is really at the core. It's just metabolized food. There's a mental body, which we call the mind, but it's a mental body. It's actually a part of the physical body. And it's a accumulation of memory and experiences over time. But then there's an energy body. Literally every human being has an electromagnetic field. It's a field of energy that comes out of the body about 6 to 8 inches, depending on the person. And this energy, largely, it's our life force energy. It determines so much of how we feel in life. Well, your mental apparatus. So if we are living in the past, which is unprocessed trauma, which is energy, there's energy in that. If we're living in that and then we're projecting it into the future and we're having some anxiety or fears about the future, this has an effect on our energy body. It almost pushes, it becomes dense. You can feel it over time. It really becomes this dense energy, typically will affect us physically at the back level. So this is why people who are quote unquote stressed usually have back issues, right? Their upper back, lower back issues. It's not an accident. It's not a random thing. The reason for that is because that's where energy is being compacted in the body. So I always say, when we come back to this moment and realize, okay, this moment, I can choose what I'm experiencing in this moment. This moment, there are certain things about this moment that I cannot change, right? What's happening in this moment, I cannot change, but what I can choose to participate with it fully. And when I do that, recognizing that there is no future, so what's amazing about, and this has been my experience and the experience of people I work with, doors that seemingly never opened start opening, things you can't explain. And why is that? It's because it's energy, because our experience, life is this universe, everything we're interacting with is simply energy. And when you operate with this moment from a non-resistive capacity, life opens up for you, because that's the energy you're quote unquote sending out there. There's a lot more we could say about that, but that's why people start to experience breakthrough. They start to move out of their limiting paradigms, not because they did anything different, just because they stopped resisting internally. And life begins to open up for us.
Yes. And with that energy, those are words that we use, such as, that resonates with me. They have bad vibes. I really like their good energy. We say it in our everyday language because on an unconscious level, which is a huge level, we know, right? If someone likes you, if you like someone the moment they walk in a room, you feel, your energies collide or not. It's the same with situations. When this doesn't feel right, when you're supposed to walk down this place and you have this feeling that comes over, there's something there and we can't necessarily explain it. And science is really, because I'm a science nut, starting to show that exists. And to see that, to actually be able to measure the energy in a space. And when you are having those down moments, you have less energy. And that's why you don't have the energy to do certain things. What is really very interesting as well when you talk about this is you highlight that it is so important to have an intention for your life and your day. And that is every day I have it on a little board. What is your intention today, so that it's not willy-nilly? How do you help your clients or just people you talk to build an intention that is meaningful for them?
That's another great question. Well, I like to ask people, first of all, especially the reason a lot of us are experiencing such high levels of anxiety, it's multi-layered, but one of the reasons is because we're we're actually not taking control of our life. And how do we do that? Well, it's like driving a car, right? If you were driving a car and you had if it was unconscious, right? Or something, like if you were no intention, but you just got in the car and you started driving, but you had no idea really what you were doing or where you were going, that could be, there could be some anxiety there. But what's amazing about something like driving is in order to get in the car, you actually have to have an idea where you're going. And then there's some focus on what you're doing to get there. It's intention. Literally, without the intention, you wouldn't even get in the car and drive to a certain location. So intention is key. What we want to do is we want to bring a level of attention, which is awareness, so that we can create intention to the everyday living process. If we don't do that, what happens is tendencies take over. These are just repetitive tendencies. That's part of the past, right? And then when tendencies are driving, we're very reactive, right? So the difference between responding to life and reacting to life is a vast difference. But when we bring intention or awareness into a situation, then we can access what I would call, a core desire. Why are we doing this? We're doing this interview because there's an intention to create something, to bring something into the world. So therefore, we're doing this. But intention is bringing your awareness to a core desire, right? So one of the things that we do early in the coaching process is we start to ask the question, what does it? We identify. There's a process we do. We identify what's your most loved, most powerful, and present self look like? And we actually have a vision. There is a vision deep inside of us of what our most loved and our most powerful self actually looks like. So we get a vision of that. And then we start to create daily realignment, daily intentions to start living by. And these just help realign at the daily basis level how we're approaching life. Because, there's an energy exchange that's happening constantly. So when you're resisting life, which is when you're reactive, just like going to the gym, you can only work out for so long because you're in resistance. You're actually pushing against some weight. And that resistance is a drain in your energy. Well, when you approach life that way, when you live life that way through this resistive manner, at the end of the day, you may be exhausted. A lot of people are what I call not just physically tired, they're soul tired. At the level of being, they just are drained of life because they've been in resistance to the way the day unfolds. So I always say, hey, listen, the best way to change your life is simply to change your day. Because what is a life? It's literally, my whole life is this moment. Like there's no other life for me. The past is gone. The future doesn't exist. So all that's in my head. The only life I have is this right here. So if I'm in a non-resistive place with life, then I'm going to get a net increase of energy. And that energy is actually, so when I actually make certain key conscious decisions of how I'm approaching life today, what my experience is that instead of being drained at the end of the day, well, I've actually received energy. It's because it's like you can be in a very restful state and be very active. So what I'm talking about is not just non-resistance. So when you take away resistance, you can be fully here, fully present, fully involved in everything you're doing simply because you're not resisting. But if you're in resistance, if something is causing tension internally, you can only do it for so long. And then you're being depleted of your energy. So one of the things that we do in the coaching work in the beginning is to really help shift fundamental paradigms of how we perceive life on a daily basis. And then there's a series of daily shifts in energy that we make so that we can start getting a net energy income. So that after a few weeks of that, people start to feel fundamentally different about their life, but really nothing has changed externally yet. It's just that we've begun to interact with life in a less resistive way, if that makes sense.
It does. And I like how you said nothing has changed in their life yet, but from your observation and your own experience, it is just yet. It will come. And that's when other people can look at you and like, something's different about you. like you have less wrinkles. There's a joy about you.
Right.
That it is very obvious to people around you that you have changed, even in that moment. You shared your book, Living for a Living, and that is not your first book. Share your books.
Yeah. So the first book I wrote is called Free to Love. And it's really about going beyond some of the barriers um, to love that we typically, and that a lot of those barriers have to do with just how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive others through the lens of body and that kind of thing. But when we go beyond that, we start to understand that really love is the ability to see your own essence, to see self in another.
Mm-hmm.
And when we do that, we let go of whatever we're holding up. And it's interesting. I like to say this about love. The term that's usually put when people talk about love is they talk about falling in love, which is an interesting way to put that because it's not climbing, it's not running, it's not striving. It's like it's falling. Why falling? Because there's something about a perception, right? When you perceive another person in a certain way, really, we're not always conscious of why are we so enamored, but we experience that internally. It's not actually external. It seems like it's external. What we're experiencing is internal, but there's a perception that we're seeing and experiencing in that other person, which causes us to let go and fall. And that letting go is really the experience of love. It's allowing. Then we allow that person, we include them into the sphere of who we are. We actually are, the distinction of what makes us separate is very thin at that point. And we allow them to be exactly who they are in our scope, in our sphere. And it's the experience of love. So the book Free to Love is kind of touches on that. There's a lot of dynamics there, but that's the first book. And then the second book is called Living for a Living, came out in 2019. And really the gist of that book, Living for a Living, is about, well, first of all, it came out, the book was written because, the question that we often get is, hey, what do you do for a living? But really what's meant by that is, what do you do for money? Which is another way of saying, what do you do to survive?
Yeah.
And a lot of my background comes from, my dad grew up in a very poor country. My mother came from southeastern Ohio, kind of the Appalachian region, a lot of generational, poverty and struggle. So on both sides, both cultural inputs in my own life, there's a lot of generational struggle. And so I grew up, what I witnessed in my own parents was almost the entirety of their life's essence and energy went towards just got to pay the bills, just got to survive. And there was a deep, my understanding is that human beings will not thrive from just surviving, just making it. We're actually here to do much more than just survive. And there was an existential sadness, stuckness I saw in my parents there. I appreciated their sacrifice, I appreciated their hard work, but internally I knew there's got to be more to this thing we call life, this existence, than just the hamster wheel of paying the bill and just doing it over and over and over and over. Why are we doing this? So what if we survive? What does that mean? And so the book Living for a Living is about actually living for a living as opposed to living for survival. And it touches on money. It touches on perception. It's really a tool that helps people move from a career that's focused on survival to a career that's focused on moving into what I call as our soul work, our life's work, the work that we're here to do that actually matters to us, beyond the paycheck, beyond the money. It's not about survival. It's much more than that. And so obviously we need money to survive, and we need money to live. And that's, I don't want to diminish that. But when we can put our life's focus and energy into what I call our soul work, our true work, the universe will conspire to pay us, to bring in the resources that we need so that we can do what it is that we're here to do. And that's, the book really delves into that. And it's kind of my story in that, if that makes sense.
Yes. Thank you for sharing that. And you yourself have a podcast.
Yes.
The Love Cast with Jamal.
Yes. So I started the Love Cast initially to be, because I always see the books that I'm writing as a beginning of a conversation, never the end of a conversation. So it's an entrance into a new way of thinking or a new conversation. So the podcast was really kind of designed to be an extension of that conversation. And now as a life coach and working with people, I just want it to be a tool where we continue to share, and I bring people, I have great interviews with folks, and we just explore these topics at a little greater detail that we can do in podcasts. So
yes.
yeah.
Wow. So you really have, you experienced, you shared, you had your own traumas that you dealt with, but now you are here at this place, and you have overcome, you have risen to this area. I know you say the future doesn't exist, but we all have some sort of goal. What do you feel like what would be a rise for you? What would be something that you would look forward to in that future that will one day manifest?
I love that question. So the intention, so right, we all have intention for the future, right? Because we're creating the future.
Yeah.
This moment is creating the next. How we approach this moment is always creating the next. And I always say desire, right? So I have desires that I would love to see unfold and manifest. One of the things that I've been thinking about a lot these days is peace. Is just peace is so vitally important for people because some people say, well, peace is the highest goal in life. And I actually think it's the lowest goal, because think about it for a moment. If you don't have peace, just a base level of peace, how do you enjoy the meal you're eating? If you're suffering and struggling, it's like if you're in resistance mode, you can't even enjoy the meal that you're eating. You can't enjoy the person in front of you. You can't enjoy the conversation. So I'm passionate about peace and about creating conditions for peace internally. And so helping people listen to themselves, number one, because in order to have peace, let's say you have a conflict with somebody's not listening. Somebody's in resistance, trying to make somebody do something they want them to do or not, and it's challenging, and that person feels threatened, and usually there's conflict. Well, that peace first starts happening. It must begin. I know it sounds cliche, but you have to learn to cultivate the conditions of peace internally. So when we start listening to ourselves deeply, start listening to the traumas that we have not processed through from our past, it's so important. Learning to get present with that, clear some of that energy, learning to accept this moment exactly the way it is. So I'm not resisting this moment. That creates an internal disposition of peace. And it also allows me to access my desire. And if I can start tapping into my desire of what could be, then I can start creating the future. But you can't start there first. You have to listen first. And so when I think about peace, I'm excited about helping cultivate an inner dimension of peace for people. But I'm also excited about where that will lead our society and our world, because we have some challenges right now. I just think about war always any international conflict or war started by people, number one. And it started by people who have not learned how to listen, how to be present, and then how to access the common desires we all have together, right? So they haven't created an inner environment of peace. So therefore, when we don't have an inner environment of peace, we look for someone to blame, some person, some situation to blame. And then when you're down that road, there's only one solution, right? We have to overcome that person. We have to challenge them or defeat them. Well, that's war. Mm-hmm. And we will never achieve peace either in personal relationships or in international relationships through force. It will never happen. Human history has demonstrated that you cannot achieve peace through external means. It must begin internally. And I'm excited about that, the prospects of that for the future.
Yeah. Well, I have truly enjoyed our conversation. It lived up to my expectations and my hopes. So I'm really excited about that. And I think you have so much to offer. Share how people can learn more about you. Do you have a website where your info is parked at? I'll have it in the description, but I always like to have people say it.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, thank you for, again, having me on your show. And I'm glad it's helpful. And, the best place that probably the easiest for people to get in contact with me is probably the website. So if you just go to my website, which is Jamal Jivanjee, first and last name.com. So JamalJivanjee.com. I'm active on social media, but all those links are there. My book, podcast, coaching, all of that information is on my website.
So I really feel that Jamal has figured it out for himself in his own life. And I'm so inspired and invigorated by the amount of peace and comfort that I felt just through the podcast interview of how comfortable he was with his own life. And that is something we can all aspire to, feeling comfortable and confident, having focus and intention with every single day, knowing that we have that power in this moment. I encourage you to listen to Jamal's podcasts. I have found so many of them interesting and invigorating, enlightening. And that is something we can all use in our day-to-day lives. And so I always ask, if you found this podcast to be interesting and you know someone that could benefit from it, please share it. You never know what this content can do for someone in the hands and ears of those that really need it. And like always, our time is precious. It is that resource we do not get back. And so if you really enjoy this podcast or this episode, please leave a heartfelt, honest review, either in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever way that you listen to podcasts. And thank you again so much for your time. And until next time, let's keep building one another up.